So this is a video that I've been preparing for quite a while, and I've been very excited to make it because a lot of planning has gone into this, a lot of thought, and yeah, I've been really excited for this one for quite a while. So this is the Architecture Awards, and what I'm going to do is I made a bunch of different categories for ranking historic architecture and a few for modernist architecture, but those are the worst categories. And yeah, so it's a combination of best and worst of architecture throughout, basically of anything that exists in the world today. So that's the first caveat is this architecture, these awards are ranking things as they exist today. So, for instance, things that used to exist but do not exist any longer, unfortunately, would not qualify. Also, this list specifically applies to architecture from countries that are basically part of European civilization, or that embody the European architectural tradition. So, for instance, I've included anywhere in Europe, Siberia, Australia, New Zealand. I'm including Latin America in this one because it is a lot of their architecture is based in the European architectural tradition, even if Latin American civilization is, in my opinion, a separate civilization. So yeah, all the Americas, South Africa, yeah, basically those places. You know, if you give me a second, I just got to make one little change. Yeah, sorry about that. I think of new things all the time, but yeah, so that's basically who I'm including here. By the way, I am including Istanbul. I'm including it as part of Europe, just for the record. I haven't included anything built by Europeans in other continents, like say, for instance, the Victoria Memorial in Kolkata, India. I'm not including anything like that, but to be honest, I'm not sure if some of those maybe would qualify. Like there is some pretty impressive stuff the British built in India. But yeah, for the record, no, I'm not including that. But I mean, again, it's subjective, like like the exact definition of what should qualify for this. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, I'm including anything in European or Latin American civilization, essentially. So it's not including like East Asia, India, Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, with the exception of like South Africa or, as I said, Istanbul, the European part of Turkey. So basically, yeah. So without further ado, I'm gonna first say what the categories are. Okay, so. And again, keep in mind, these are architecture awards, so this doesn't take into account natural beauty at all, like mountains or forests or national parks or anything like that. Like this is specifically about architecture. So I have most beautiful country, most beautiful large city, most beautiful medium-sized city, most beautiful small town or village, most beautiful city or town overall, most beautiful church exterior, most beautiful church interior, most beautiful church overall, most beautiful palace or castle exterior, most beautiful palace or castle interior, most beautiful palace or castle overall, most beautiful room within a building, most beautiful parliament or capitol building, most beautiful city hall, most beautiful fountain, most beautiful statue or monument, most beautiful university campus, most beautiful train station, most beautiful Islamic building. So that's anything left over by the Muslims in these parts of the world. Most beautiful ruin, most beautiful building interior overall, most beautiful building exterior overall, most beautiful building overall, most beautiful town or city square, most beautiful skyscraper, best era or style of architecture, best art museum, best painting, best sculptures. So sculpture would be different from statue or monument. Sculpture is smaller. That's kind of the way I differentiate it. So those are the best categories. And now for the worst. Ugliest city, So I'm not dividing the city sizes for this one. I'm just having one for ugliest city. Ugliest building, ugliest modernist addition to a historic building, worst art museum, ugliest work of art. I put art in quotation marks here. Worst era or style of architecture, and then Lifetime Achievement Award for worst architect of all time. So, without further ado, yeah, here's the second time I've said that so far in this video. Yeah, here's the awards. So, for most beautiful country, and I reiterate again, this is just taking into account architecture. I'm not taking into account nature for this award or for any other. So, the nominees are Italy, Spain, France, Czechia or Czech Republic, Portugal, Croatia, or Austria. And keep in mind, I'm weighing this on a per capita basis. So I'm trying not to be biased against smaller countries here, which is why I did include like a few smaller ones also. But I'm not including microstates because I think that's unfair. So, like for instance, I'm not including Vatican City. So, okay, most beautiful country, the award goes to Italy. Fucking Italy. I'm sorry, but this one, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of architectural beauty in all these countries, but I just think Italy, it kind of just blows the competition away. Like, if you're in an architecture competition and your opponent is Italy, good luck to you. That's all I can say. Like, Italy is just spectacular on so many levels. It has so many iconic cities, small towns, villages. Like, it's just gorgeous all over. And there's so much well-preserved architecture, so much intricate, ornate architecture, and just also simple architecture too. So it's just very hard to beat. So yeah, Italy wins for most beautiful country. Okay, so for most beautiful large city, nominees are Rome, Paris, Prague, Barcelona, Vienna, St. Petersburg, that's Russia, not Florida. That sure as hell wouldn't be nominated. Madrid, Lisbon, and Stockholm. So, the winner is, for most beautiful large city, Prague. Now, what I love about Prague, to me, it feels like heaven. Like, literally, there's something just heavenly about the architecture there. It is so gorgeous, so beautiful, so intricate. It feels like the visual expression of what classical music sounds like. Like, it is just an utterly gorgeous city. I was absolutely blown away when I went there. It's phenomenal. So I have to I'm going to give the award to Prague. I think it's the most beautiful large city. And by the way, for this, for large city, I've defined it as kind of somewhere with a metropolitan area of well over 1 million. Big enough that, like, you know, there'd be a subway system and stuff like that. Like, a big enough that's generally considered a big city. So I'd say, like, at well over 1 million in the metropolitan area. So the next is most beautiful medium-sized city. So I guess my definition of medium-sized city would be, like, probably between, let's say, I don't know. It's a pretty wide range, but I'd say 1 million at the top would be like, I'd say at the bottom, I would say big enough to be like not a village or small town. So maybe like, I don't know, 20, 25,000. And at the upper limit would be maybe 1 million or so, give or take. It's a pretty wide range, but like, I can't just break this down into like 1 million categories. So yeah, like roughly 20,000 to 1 million, give or take. So most beautiful medium-sized city, the nominees are Florence, Edinburgh, Venice, Granada, Spain, Bruges, Bamberg, that's in Germany, Siena, Dubrovnik, and New Orleans. So the winner for most beautiful medium-sized city is Venice. Yeah, Venice is just hard to beat. Like, the combination of canals and Renaissance architecture is just phenomenal. You know, people call it cliched, but you know what? It's a cliche for a reason. Venice is truly gorgeous. It's something else. It's really one of a kind. Like, a city that literally appears out of the water, and it's even shaped like a fish. It's quite an amazing place. So, Most beautiful city overall, so that's anyone from the previous two categories. So it's either it's either Venice or Prague. This is a very tough decision, and I went back and forth on it. And honestly, I don't think there is a clear answer. I think they're both very high on the list, but I very narrowly gave it to Prague. And the reason is, here's what I thought. If Venice didn't have canals, would it be number one? And I'm like, you know what? If there were no canals in Venice, then Prague would be the clear winner. So the question is, do the canals make the difference? And it's like, canals do make a city more beautiful, but you could do that to almost any city. Like, add canals and then it's more beautiful. And it's like, okay, fair enough. Should Venice be the number one? Maybe, maybe not. Like, if it wasn't for the canals, it would definitely probably be in top 5. But it's so close. But I'm going to have to very narrowly give it to Prague, because I do think Prague has very slightly the architectural style that I think is the best. But it's extremely debatable. So yeah, I'm narrowly going to give it to Prague, but I think it's a very close one. Okay, so most beautiful small town or village. So this is like less than 20,000. These are like not cities. These are clearly, at this point, small towns or villages. So the nominations are Manarola, which is in the Cinque Terre in Italy, and Vernazza and Rio Maggiore, which are also in the Cinque Terre in Italy, the 5 towns on the Ligurian shoreline that are on cliffs. Hallstatt, Austria, Rothenburg ob der Tauber, Germany, Schwäbisch Hall, Germany, Amalfi on the Amalfi Coast in Italy, and right next door, Atrani, also on the Amalfi Coast in Italy. So the award goes to Manarola, which is in the Cinque Terre. I just think of the Cinque Terre towns, it's very slightly the most beautiful, and I think the Cinque Terre overall are the most beautiful small towns simply because of their positioning. Like, the way the architecture is set up, it's just so gorgeous, like being on the cliffside. And yeah, it's amazing. And I know I said I'm ranking architectural beauty and not natural beauty. However, when the natural beauty is part of the architectural beauty, like the actual positioning of the architecture, then yes, I do have to take it into account. So say, for instance, I would not put Cape Town or Rio de Janeiro on this list because their architecture isn't particularly spectacular. It's the nature itself. But when the nature is incorporated into the architecture, as in the case of the Cinque Terre, then yes, it is a factor. I know that's a bit ambiguous, might seem a bit like cheating, but those are the rules I'm giving, so those are the rules. And yes, I'm giving it to Manarola in the Cinque Terre in Italy. Most beautiful small town or village. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. All 3 of the ones in the Cinque Terre mentioned, I think, are at the top of the list, but I think very narrowly this is the most beautiful, but it's definitely debatable. So yeah, next category, most beautiful church exterior. So we have the Milan Duomo, the Florence Duomo, Notre Dame de Paris, Seville Cathedral, the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, and I am counting that as a church in these awards because that's what it was built as originally. St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow, the Church of the Savior on the Spilled Blood in St. Petersburg, Ulm Minster in Ulm, Germany, Cologne Cathedral in Cologne, Germany, and Delft Cathedral in Delft, Netherlands. So the winner for this award is the Duomo in Florence. Now, this cathedral has just such an astounding exterior that it is simply jaw-dropping. It is, I think it's, I don't know exactly, but the interior is not very ornate, and I think it might be because they just ran out of money because the exterior is just so absurdly fancy and beautiful. Like, the only thing in the interior that's really ornate is this one painting that's in the dome itself, which is actually spectacular, but the rest of the interior is quite plain, and I think, I'm not sure on this one, but I think they might have just ran out of money. But yeah, the exterior of the Florence Duomo is really something else. It's jaw-dropping. It is utterly spectacular. It is mind-blowingly beautiful. So yeah, I'm definitely, this actually wasn't hard for me. Florence Duomo, I think, is for exterior is number one with a bullet. It's definitely number one. It's so absurdly spectacular. So, most beautiful church interior. The nominees are St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, St. Mary's Basilica in Krakow, Poland, Church of the Savior on the Spilled Blood in St. Petersburg, St. Stephen's Basilica in Budapest, Hungary, Notre Dame de Montréal. So yeah, I had Notre Dame de Paris for the first and for exterior, and Notre Dame de Montréal for interior. Siena Duomo in Siena, Italy. St. Mark's Basilica in Venice. Cordoba Cathedral in Cordoba, Spain. And then St. Chapelle in Paris. So the winner for most beautiful church interior is St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, in the Vatican City. It's just hard to beat. The interior in St. Peter's Basilica is just beyond spectacular on so many levels, and just in scale, in size, and also in intricacy. The ceiling, the decorations, everything. It's something else. Like that basilica is so massive. It's huge. Like if you look at it on the 3D version of Google Street View, it's absurd how big it is compared to like every other building surrounding it and in the city as a whole. It's massive. And it's so gorgeous, and it's something else. Like it really does deserve its status as basically the chief cathedral of Catholicism. Although I think like something like there's another cathedral in Rome or basilica that is technically considered the seat of Catholicism. I don't know, but for all intents and purposes, it really is St. Peter's Basilica. So yeah, absolutely phenomenal building, very gorgeous. So most beautiful church overall. So this takes into account both the interior and exterior. So it's going to include ones that I've had on both lists. So, and again, just because it doesn't appear, it's taking into account both. So some might appear on one list, but not the other. But the reason is, it might be very nice in one, but not quite nice enough to make the short list, but when looking at it overall, it ranks fairly highly on both. So here are the nominees for most beautiful church overall. The Siena Duomo, St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, the Milan Duomo, St. Mary's Basilica in Krakow, Poland, Notre Dame de Paris, and the Church of the Savior on the Spilled Blood in St. Petersburg, Russia. And by the way, am I forgetting? Okay, did I mention St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow for most beautiful exterior? I'm pretty sure I did. But yeah, that was on the nominees. But it's not for overall, but it is for exterior. But yeah, most beautiful church overall. This was an extremely tough one. I went back and forth, and to be honest, I'm not really confident on this one because it's such a close race. I think that it's almost a 4-way tie. And it's so close, but I'm going to give it to the Hagia Sophia. And I think it's because the combination of the interior and exterior are both so jaw-dropping, and it is so one of a kind in the way it looks. Like, it doesn't really look like any other church in the world. And yeah, I mean, I know it's technically a mosque right now, but I'm still considering it a church. So yeah, I'm going to give it to that. But honestly, it was almost a 4-way tie. Like, honestly, the Siena Duomo, St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, and St. Peter's in Rome were all very strong contenders for this award, and I went back and forth. Now, interestingly, despite the fact that I had the Florence Duomo as number one with a bullet for exterior, it wasn't even on the short list for overall because the interior just doesn't measure up. I'm sorry, but it doesn't. So yeah, it's a tight race, but yeah, I gave it to the Hagia Sophia, but honestly, I didn't feel totally sure on this one because I think there's strong arguments for some of the others. Like St. Peter's, I think there's a very strong argument for, and I also think the Siena Duomo, I think, has strong argument too. And St. Mark's Basilica in Venice. So yeah, it's a very close race. So, most beautiful palace or castle exterior. And I was speaking with a friend of mine. He was recommending that I break this into two categories for palace and castle based on whether it's fortified or not. I really considered doing that. I really wanted to, but I looked at it and it's like the definition of what counts as fortified is just so vague and ambiguous because you have some that have like walls, but they're not really big walls or anything like that. And it's like the definition of palace versus castle, it's just so tenuous that like I found it too hard to separate this into two categories. It would have required way too much research. So yeah, I've kept these as one category. But yeah, it's definitely a good consideration. The distinction here. I just couldn't do it. But okay, so for most beautiful palace or castle exterior, I have Chateau de Chambord in France. Well, actually, all these that are Chateau de something are in France. So Chateau de Chambord, Chateau de Chenonceau, Chateau de Chantilly, Chateau de Pierrefonds, Pena Palace in Portugal. It's a lot of P's. Blenheim Palace in England, the Alcazar of Segovia in Spain, Neuschwanstein Castle in Germany, the Louvre, which was originally built as a palace, so it counts, in Paris. The Hermitage, again, same situation, in St. Petersburg. Burg-Eltz Castle in Germany. Catherine Palace in St. Petersburg. And Peterhof Palace in St. Petersburg. Quite a lot of nominees here. This one's tough. This one's very tough because I'm looking at what I chose and I no longer feel confident in it. I'm no longer sure that I made the right choice here. But this is so hard. Okay. You know, I'm going to change what I have here. I'm going to give it to the Louvre. Because I think the Louvre is just such a phenomenal building. And yes, it was originally built as a palace, so it counts. I was going to give it to Neuschwanstein in Germany, but thinking about it, Neuschwanstein, a big part of its beauty is the surrounding nature. And it does get into the debate of like what counts as architectural versus natural beauty. And it's like, because so much of it depends on the surroundings and not just the building itself, but the surroundings. And I know I said first Cinque Terre, but that's how the buildings are built into the surroundings. So it's the layout of the buildings themselves. I don't know. I'm going to give it to the Louvre, but it was very close. I considered Neuschwanstein. I was going to give it to Neuschwanstein, but I think objectively speaking, I got to give it to the Louvre. I think it's the most beautiful exterior. It's just phenomenal. It's so intricate. It's so gorgeous. But this one is really close. And there's arguments to be made for a lot of them. So, most beautiful palace or castle interior. Okay, the nominees for this one are Chateau de Versailles, Chateau de Fontainebleau, Catherine Palace in St. Petersburg, Peterhof Palace in St. Petersburg, and Madrid Royal Palace. So, I'm going to give this to Chateau de Versailles. No surprise there. Its interior is renowned for a reason. It is very utterly gorgeous, very intricate, so many gorgeous rooms. There's a reason why tourists crowd this place. Yeah, Chateau de Versailles is number one for palace or castle interior, for sure. Now, most beautiful palace or castle overall. So this takes into account both interior and exterior. The three nominees are Chateau de Versailles, Peterhof Palace in St. Petersburg, and then Catherine Palace in St. Petersburg. And the winner is... Wait a sec. Okay, hold on. Wait. We have a bit of an issue here. Okay. Chateau de Versailles is the winner, but it should have also been nominated for Best Exterior. I didn't have it there, but I should have. Or maybe I shouldn't have, because I think the exterior is nice. Here's the catch. Okay. Peterhof and Catherine Palace were nominated for both Best Exterior and Best Interior, but yet Chateau de Versailles was only nominated for Best Interior, and yet I have it as winning for overall. That actually does make sense in my opinion, and I'll explain it. Chateau de Versailles, its exterior is really, really nice, but I don't think it's quite enough to make the shortlist for Best Exterior. However, the interior is so amazing that combined with the exterior, which is nice, but just didn't make the shortlist for best exterior, combined, I do think Chateau de Versailles is the overall winner, despite the fact that it didn't appear on both lists and Peterhof and Catherine Palace both did. So, I mean, it's a bit of a convoluted explanation, but honestly, I do think Versailles is the winner for most beautiful palace or castle overall. It's just so exquisite. It's so gorgeous. It wins. So, most beautiful room within a building. So this doesn't count cathedral sanctuaries. This is the most beautiful room within a building. So palace or any other building. I have the Antiquarium in the Munich Residence, the Great Gallery in Palace of Schönbrunn in Vienna, the Hall of Mirrors in Chateau de Versailles, the Galerie d'Apollon in the Louvre, the Grand Escalier in the Paris Opera House, the Foyer in the Paris Opera House, and there's one room in the Palais du Luxembourg in Paris. I could not for the life of me figure out what this room is called, but it is the long room with painted ceilings. It's a lot of gold, a lot of painted stuff in it. Very beautiful. So the award for most beautiful room within a building goes to the Hall of Mirrors in the Chateau de Versailles. This one's probably no surprise. It's renowned for a reason. It is well known for a reason. It's gorgeous. It's phenomenal. It deserves the award. It is absolutely spectacular. So, now, most beautiful Parliament or Capitol building. So I'm not doing interior, exterior separately for this one. I'm just doing it overall. Because if I'm going to separate everything like that, these awards are just going to take forever. So the nominees are the Budapest Parliament buildings, the Palace of Westminster in London, the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C., the Canadian Parliament buildings in Ottawa, and the Austrian Parliament buildings in Vienna. And I'm making a note here, the Kremlin in Moscow is not actually the Parliament building there, technically, so it actually doesn't count for this award. Plus, the Kremlin's actually like a collection of buildings that aren't even all connected. So the Kremlin's really a different type of thing, to my understanding. So the winner for this is the Palace of Westminster in London. It is absolutely gorgeous, very intricate, inside and outside, beautiful building, and its placement on the river is also quite gorgeous. It's phenomenal. Big Ben is part of this building, and also just the main Palace of Westminster itself. It definitely deserves this award. So yeah, most beautiful city hall. The nominees are Vienna City Hall, Brussels City Hall, Munich City Hall, and Paris City Hall. So the winner for this is Paris. Yet again, Paris is winning a lot of these awards, but yeah, I think it does have the most beautiful city hall overall. It's very ornate, very pretty. So yeah, for most beautiful building exterior overall, it would be one of the ones I already listed. So it would be either the Duomo in Florence, the Louvre in Paris, Palace of Westminster in London. To be honest, none of the city halls would quite be at that level. So yeah, by elimination, it would be one of those three. And between the three of those, I am going to give the award to the Duomo in Florence. I think it is the most beautiful building exterior overall. Now, for most beautiful interior overall, again, by the process of deduction from what we've already have, there's the Chateau de Versailles and St. Peter's Basilica. Between these two, the sacred and the secular, it's hard to decide. I'm going to have to give it to St. Peter's Basilica, but it's so close. And I think there's good arguments for both of them. But yeah, it's very close, though. And for most beautiful building overall, so yeah, it would be between Chateau de Versailles, Hagia Sophia, and Palace of Westminster. I'm going to have to give the award most beautiful building overall. I'm going to have to give it to Chateau de Versailles. Because taking into account both the exterior and interior, I do think it's probably the most beautiful building overall. But there's a lot on the list that really come close. So yeah, now that we're done with the buildings, let's see, what do we got? So most beautiful fountain. So the nominees for this are Buckingham Fountain in Chicago, the Latona Fountain in Chateau de Versailles in the Gardens of Versailles, the Obelisk Brunnen Fountain in the Gardens of the Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna, and Trevi Fountain in Rome. Now, I'm only counting the fountain itself. I'm not counting the building behind it for Trevi Fountain. That's an important caveat I got to make here. So, the most beautiful fountain goes to Buckingham Fountain in Chicago. Yeah, this fountain is just gorgeous. It's very spectacular. It's very intricate. It's big. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. I'm giving it Best Fountain Award. So, most beautiful statue or monument. And again, these are larger statues. These aren't smaller ones. So these are like large statues as opposed to like small ones, which I have under the best sculpture category. It's a bit ambiguous, but I think once I read out the nominees, it'll be clear what I'm talking about. So the nominees for this are the Christopher Columbus statue in Barcelona, which is again at the top of a pedestal, so it's a big monument. Mount Rushmore in South Dakota, the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., the Statue of Liberty in New York City, the Arc de Triomphe in Barcelona, Spain, the Arc de Triomphe, the other one, in Paris, and the Altar of the Fatherland in Rome. So, the most beautiful statue or monument is the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Yeah, I think that one's just hard to beat. It's so stunning and big. When I saw it in person, I was shocked by how big it is. It's huge. And it's very ornate and intricate. It's imposing. It's epic. It's an epic monument. It's very hard to beat. So yeah, Arc de Triomphe gets the Best Monument Award. Okay, so most beautiful university campus. So the nominees for this are Cambridge University in England, Oxford University in England, University of Glasgow in Scotland, University of Edinburgh in Scotland, Harvard University in Massachusetts, Coimbra University in Portugal, and University of Toronto in Canada. So the award for most beautiful university goes to Oxford University. That one's just hard to beat. Again, no surprise there. It's iconic for a reason, like the Bodleian Library, just the Bridge of Sighs, so many beautiful buildings. It's an absolutely stunning, phenomenal campus. So yeah, next is most beautiful train station. So after this, São Bento Station in Porto, Portugal, Antwerp Central Station in Antwerp, Belgium, Grand Central Station in New York City, and Union Station in Washington, D.C. So the award goes to Antwerp Central Station. So just for both interior and exterior, it's really an easy choice. Like it's such a phenomenal building. It is epic. It's gorgeous inside and out. I think it is the most beautiful train station. So yeah. Now this is interesting. The next one is most beautiful Islamic building. This was actually suggested to me by one of my viewers. And so this means basically a building that was built by Muslims and in the Islamic style, but within European territory. These are all in Europe. They're all in the continent of Europe. And I'm not including the Hagia Sophia here because I think its beauty is predominantly from the Christian elements of the original church. And if a building has a mix of Islamic and Christian elements, then for this award, I'm only taking into account specifically the Islamic elements. So The nominees for this are the Blue Mosque in Istanbul, Dolmabahce Palace in Istanbul, Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, the Ortaköy Mosque in Istanbul, the Alhambra of Granada in Spain, Seville Cathedral in Spain, the Alcazar of Seville, and Cordoba Cathedral in Spain. So the winner for this is the Alhambra of Granada. Now, I just think the Alhambra is such a gorgeous complex of buildings. It's just so spectacular, the way it looks on the Granada skyline, and also the intricate architecture of the buildings themselves, on the interior and exterior. It's very phenomenal, very intricate. So, but this was a close race because I was seriously considering giving this to the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. That one's also quite spectacular. It's very close. It's very hard to say, but I narrowly gave it to the Alhambra just because I think it integrates itself into the skyline of Granada so well and so beautifully that I had to give it to the Alhambra, but it's very close. So, most beautiful ruin. I have the Parthenon in Athens, the Forum in Rome, and the Colosseum in Rome. So, most beautiful ruin I gave to the Colosseum in Rome. I think this one's hard to beat for ruins. It just goes without saying. It's the Colosseum. It's epic. It's gorgeous. It's spectacular. And you can really see the lingering traces of the beauty of the original building by looking at this ruin. So yeah, Colosseum in Rome, definitely best ruin. Most beautiful town or city square. So unless otherwise stated, it's basically the main square in the city or town. But if it's one that's not technically the main one, I will mention that like some cities are big enough they have several main squares and there's not really one main square. So yeah, the nominees of this are Brussels main square, Wrocław main square, Gdansk main square. So Wrocław, Poland, Gdansk, Poland, Warsaw main square, Poznan, Poland main square, Krakow, Poland main square, Antwerp, Belgium main square, Bruges, Belgium main square, Siena, Italy main square, Lucca, Italy. I think there's several main squares. This is the one that's kind of oval shaped. I don't know the name offhand. Verona. This is the square where the big tower is in Verona, Italy. Prague. So the main square of Prague. Segovia, Spain. Český Budějovice in the Czech Republic. Florence, the square in front of the Duomo. Milan, also the square in front of the Duomo. Rome, Piazza Navona Square. Naples has two, Piazza del Plebiscito. I pronounced that like a pleb, but yeah, Piazza del Plebiscito. Piazza Dante, also in Naples, and then Palace Square in front of the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, Russia. So the winner for most beautiful square is Brussels, the main square. I just think this one's hard to beat. It's so gorgeous. It's so intricate. It really looks like heaven. It's astonishingly spectacular. So yeah, I have to give it to Brussels, but honestly, there's a lot of good contenders for this one. So yeah, most beautiful skyscraper. Now this one's interesting because they're all in the United States. So most beautiful skyscraper, the nominees are the Woolworth Building in New York City, the Manhattan Municipal Building, the Helmsley Building, also in New York City, the Pierre Hotel in New York City, the Chicago Board of Trade Building, the Wrigley Building in Chicago, the London Guarantee Building in Chicago, 35 East Wacker, which is also the Jewelers Building in Chicago, and then the Tribune Tower in Chicago. So the winner is the Tribune Tower in Chicago. This one is just so, the top of the building is just so ornate, so beautiful. I think it's the best skyscraper. It's imposing, it's gorgeous, it's very Gothic looking. It's spectacular. And there's so many spectacular skyscrapers in that one part of Chicago near the bridge there. But I just think that's the best one overall. It was close though. I did consider giving it to the Pierre Hotel in New York City because I think that one's also quite beautiful. But narrowly, I decided the Tribune Tower is the winner. So Tribune Tower in Chicago. So best era or style of architecture overall. So I have Renaissance, medieval, classical, Art Nouveau, and Baroque. And with Baroque, I'm including Rococo because I think they're very closely linked and they're basically variations of the same style. So the winner is Baroque. Yeah, when it comes to architecture, you really have to go for Baroque. If it's not Baroque, do fix it. So yeah, Baroque is the best. It's so ornate. It's so beautiful. I just think with Baroque architecture, you can't go wrong. It's just a great era in architectural history. It's produced so much amazing architecture really across the planet. So beautiful, especially in Europe, but also Latin America. So yeah, Baroque architecture, yeah, I have as number one, the best era or style of architecture. So best art museum, I have the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, the Louvre in Paris, the National Gallery in London, the Prado in Madrid, and the Art Institute of Chicago. So, best art museum is the Louvre in Paris. Is this any surprise to anyone? No, it isn't. It's just the best art museum. It just is. So, best painting. Now, this one's interesting because some of these are a little bit more obscure, ones that I've seen personally at art museums and I really like, but others are more famous. So we have The Lady of Shalott by John William Waterhouse, Woman with a Parasol by Claude Monet, Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh, The Night with the Flower Nymphs by Georges Rochegros, and Liberty Leading the People by Eugene Delacroix. So that's the famous French Revolution painting. And the award for best painting goes to The Night with the Flower Nymphs by Georges Rochegros. Now, this is probably the least well-known of any of these paintings, so you might want to look it up. I saw it. I think it was either at the Louvre or the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. It's a beautiful painting. I really love it. I just think it's so gorgeous, and it's very, very Chad coded. So yeah, I think it's an amazing painting. It's my favorite painting that I've seen. I love it. So yeah, that's what I have as the number one. Best sculpture. Now again, these are smaller sculptures compared to what I had earlier for statue. It's not part of a bigger monument. It's just the sculpture in and of itself. So I have The Abduction of a Sabine Woman. I'm not going to say the other word in the title. So I'm just going to say Abduction of a Sabine Woman by Guillaume Bologna, located in Florence. Michelangelo's David, also located in Florence. And the Andrew Jackson statue, which is there's versions of it in both New Orleans and Washington, D.C., by Clark Mills. And the award for best sculpture goes to Michelangelo's David. No surprise there. This one is well renowned for a reason. It's imposing, it's awesome, it's beautiful. So yeah, Michelangelo's David. Okay, so that is it for the awards for best of anything. Now we got on to the real fun part, which is the worst awards. The awards for the shittiest things. And again, it doesn't fully match up with the awards for best because some of these wouldn't be fun or interesting to look at for worst. So they're somewhat similar, but a bit different for which ones I have for worst. So the first is ugliest city overall. And I'm not going to break it down by different population categories. I'm just going to go ugliest city overall. So we have Las Vegas, Nevada, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Johannesburg, South Africa, Chisinau, Moldova, Detroit, Michigan. And Detroit wasn't always ugly, but today it's just so abandoned that I have to put it in the list just for how decrepit it is. Norilsk, Russia, and then Novosibirsk, Russia. But honestly, you could interchangeably put many Siberian cities here. Or parts of Russia that are not like Moscow or St. Petersburg or nearby. So the award for ugliest city goes to Norilsk, Russia. Norilsk is a city, is at the very northern tip of Russia. It's very cold. It's a mining city. And they had the idea to make it more beautiful. They would paint the buildings, the ugly buildings, in bright colors. But what did that do? It actually made the city even more hideous. It would actually be better looking if they hadn't done that. The bright garish colors combined with the dystopian commie blocks, it's hideous. It is utterly fucking hideous looking. So I'm sorry, but Norilsk, Russia, gets the award for ugliest city in the world. Now, interestingly, I've talked a lot about how many post-war German cities are hideous. I do think they're utterly hideous compared to what they look like before the war. I'm just not sure if any of them is technically the most hideous, because you do have these like little bits and pieces here and there of like restored architecture that looks decent. So, I mean, the German cities have definitely fallen the furthest from where they were before, but I just don't think they're the absolute ugliest. So yeah, Norilsk, Russia, I think, is the worst. So, ugliest building. A lot of nominees here. So, Robarts Library at the University of Toronto, the OCAD building, Ontario College of Arts and Design, I think that's what it stands for, also in Toronto, Boston City Hall, Kunsthaus Graz in Graz, Austria, Torre Gennaro Valverde Marin in San Jose, Costa Rica, Habitat Apartments in Montreal, Tours Ailaude in Paris, Ailaude, Aillaud in Paris, Pompidou Center in Paris, Le Valet de Scampia in Naples. So those are, if you've ever watched the TV show Gomorrah, those are the apartment buildings that are heavily featured in that show. La Casa del Portuale, also in Naples. Piazza Grande, also in Naples. I think that one was in Gomorrah also more briefly. Alexandra Road Estate in London. So if you've seen the first Kingsman movie, it's where Eggsy lives. Those the apartment buildings where he lives toward the beginning of the film. And the Slovak Radio Building in Bratislava. So the award for ugliest building goes to Torre Gennaro Valverde Marin in San Jose, Costa Rica. Now, I was debating whether to give this to Boston City Hall, because Boston City Hall is very ugly, and it did win, an award where a bunch of users, like a bunch of people, voted for it as the ugliest building ever. It definitely deserves that, but I think Torre Gennaro Valverde Marin in San Jose, Costa Rica, I think is the ugliest. It's tall, it's hideous, it's imposing, it's just a fucking monstrosity. It really embodies the word brutalism. And by the way, if that movie wins for Best Picture, then fuck the Oscars. But yeah, The Brutalist. But yeah, seriously, fuck brutalism and fuck that building. That wins the award for ugliest building ever. It's just so ugly. I can't believe they constructed it. It looks just like a gigantic middle finger to everyone around it. It looks like somewhere where like genocide would take place, like where people would be sent to be murdered by some sort of like secret police or whatever. It's so ugly. So, ugliest modernist addition to a historic building. We have the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto, One Spadina Crescent, also in Toronto, the Dresden Military History Museum in Dresden, Germany, and Chateau Laurier, what they're currently adding to it, those bastards, in Ottawa. So, the winner for this one is the Royal Ontario Museum. Yeah, that crystal is such a piece of shit. It is so hideous. Why did anyone think that was a good idea? So disgusting, hideous, ugly. So, worst art museum. The nominees are the Bilbao Guggenheim, the New York City Guggenheim, and Museum of Modern Art in New York City. And the award goes to the Guggenheim in New York City. It's just ugly inside and out. The works of art are shit. It's such a waste of money. I actually went there with my dad years ago. It's so ugly, so disgusting. It's shit. It's crap. It's garbage. Fuck the Guggenheim. So yeah, ugliest work of art. And art is in quotation marks here. And I know there's a million works of art that are just a blank canvas of like white or black or whatever, but these things are uglier than nothingness. Like those paintings are nothingness. Jackson Pollock paint splotches. Those are also basically nothingness, but these are worse than nothing. So we have Fountain by Duchamp, which is the drinking fountain, the urinal as a drinking fountain and all its imitators. We have the Martin Luther King statue in Boston, which basically looks kind of like goatsy, or like his head is up his own ass or something. It's just really weird looking. And finally, Vorm Fellow's Attitude, which is basically gigantic pieces of shit. And the award For ugliest work of art goes to Vorm Fellows Attitude. I don't know where this one's located offhand, but it's literally giant pieces of shit. Yeah, I mean, it is what it purports itself as. Giant pieces of shit. So yeah, that gets the award for ugliest work of art. It's literally shit. Worst era or style of architecture. Okay, so the nominees for this are modernist, international style, postmodernist, and brutalist. And I'm giving it to brutalist. It lives up to the name. It's hideous. It's dehumanizing. It makes you feel like shit when you're around it. It just makes you want to, like, you know, just not go on anymore. It's just so ugly. It's so brutal. It's you know, it's hideous. So brutalist is the worst. And Lifetime Achievement Award for Worst Architect of All Time. The nominees are Le Corbusier, I.M. Pei, Laszlo Toth, who's from the movie The Brutalist, and Daniel Libeskind. And I'm giving the award to Daniel Libeskind because he specializes in ruining historic buildings with modernist additions. Like, he did the one for Royal Ontario Museum and for the Dresden Military History Museum. So you know what? Fuck that guy in particular. So Daniel Libeskind gets the award for worst architect of all time. Fuck you, Daniel Libeskind. So yeah, those are all the awards, and I hope you guys had fun listening to this. So yeah, that's all for now.